Dobré odpoledne, good afternoon, schönen guten Nachmittag. Heute treffen wir uns hier mit der EVZ und ich werde nicht weiter Deutsch reden. Dnes se tu setkáme díky EVZ nadaci a už nebudu dále mluvit česky ani německy, but I will switch into English. Dear colleagues, friends, dear guests, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to today's gathering, EVZ Conversations, Revisited, Czech-German Memory and Beyond. Thank you for joining us here at Campus Hybernská for what I hope will be an engaging and thoughtful afternoon. The side event of the 9th Annual Memory Studies Association Conference, kindly supported by the EVZ Foundation, brings together scholars, artists, educators, and practitioners committed to critical engaging with how to remember and how do we remember, how we interpret and teach history, and how we confront its ongoing legacy. The Czech-German culture of remembrance has undergone profound changes in the decades since the end of the World War II and the fall of the Iron Curtain, shaped by reconciliation, but also by persistent complexities of shared and divergent historical narratives. In this space, we are invited not only to revisit those narratives, but also to reflect on the present tensions and challenges in historical political understanding and education. How can we foster open critical dialogue between young generation in Czech-German youth encounters? How do we ensure that memorial sites remain spaces for reflection and learning, not ritualized or distant from a lived experience? These questions become even more pressing in the face of growing geopolitical uncertainties that remind us, again, unfortunately, of the fragility of peace and the ongoing relevance of the troubled pasts, such as World War II. It is truly a shared understanding of this history across our borders, and we are adequately prepared to draw meaningful lessons from the present. Are we really? The intergenerational transformation of trauma and memory through family history, silences, and inherited experiences continue to shape how people in both Germany and the Czech Republic engage with recent history. These personal legacies often blur the line between individual and collective memory and challenge the official narrative thought in schools or presented in public commemorations. At the same time, we cannot ignore the growing fragmentation of memory in the digital age we are all facing. Watch your mobile phones, switch off your sound. Social media, while a powerful tool for the storytelling, also plays a role in deepening polarization and amplifying distorted or competing truths. This brings both new responsibilities and new opportunities for those engaged in civil education and memory work. And yet, beyond the bilateral lens, Czech-German experience resonates with memory cultures across and beyond Europe. Whether in Argentina, Ukraine, or Belarus, where some of our guests today have strong roots, we see shared struggles over historical justice, cultural trauma, and the politics of remembrance. These intersections can enrich our perspectives and connect us to a truly transnational conversation. With this in mind, I am honored to open today's event. I would also like to invite Professor Astrid Schmetterling and Nikita Kadan to briefly introduce the exhibition Voices of Memory, which you can visit on the upper floor after our conversations, which opens later in the afternoon, and you can refresh yourself in between, and offers a poignant artistic reflection on memory and its many voices, and voices of memory, rightly so. Thank you for being here with us. I look forward to this discussion, and we may start now. I see the room full. If somebody needs a chair, our hostesses will navigate you so that you feel as comfortable as you can. If anybody needs water or anything, it's outside. Don't hesitate to drink as much as you need. It's a hot day. We don't want anybody to collapse. With well-being in mind, the floor is open to you, dear Astrid and dear Nikita. Go.
So we're making it a bit informal now. Before Nikita speaks, I am Astrid Schmetterling. I'm co-chair of the Memory and Arts Working Group of the Memory Studies Association. My other co-chair is Nela Milic, who I see is sitting there in the corner. And I feel really honored to be invited to introduce the exhibition, which has been generously supported by the EVZ Foundation. And as Katarzyna said, it opens at 4 upstairs in this building. And I have to say, I'm also very proud that the exhibition has been curated by 2 members of our Memory and Arts Working Group, namely Branislava Kuburovic standing there and Irena Zhechozhova right there in the back. So thank you both for curating this exhibition. So the working group that Nela and I co-chair was founded because we wanted to give artworks a more prominent role in memory studies and invite scholars and practitioners who do not merely draw on artworks for the purposes of illustrating a point, but actually consider the role of art in the transmission of memory. So we're bringing together several interdisciplinary formations in our working group, namely memory studies, trauma studies, and visual studies. Our group believes that the visual image, and particularly art, gives expression to experience by transmuting it into form, and not only by narrating a story, but by enacting its affect. We may know factual details about events in history or in the present, but having a visual and sensory experience of them often fosters a deeper level of understanding. So works of art, material images, can touch, stir, and challenge us. They can stop us in our tracks and interrupt our enclosed selves. Artworks bear witness to events by representing them. That means bringing them into the presence before the viewers. And in that sense, they can create a space for a witness who did not directly observe an event and enable multiple intersubjective connections across generations and cultures. And the Voices of Memory exhibition offers precisely that kind of space to encounter works created by artists from different parts of the world. So Olga Bubic, who will be speaking on this panel, is a Belarusian artist and writer now based in exile in Berlin. She engages with the memory of World War II with a focus on nature and nature as a witness and victim of the violence committed at former Nazi concentration camps and Soviet sites of mass execution. Nikita Kadan, who also has work in the exhibition, and that particular work also addresses World War II, specifically the role of the Ukrainian Guards at the concentration camp of Flossenbürg, near the German border with Czechoslovakia. At the heart of Mirta Kupferminz's exploration of memory's fragility through found photography, or orphaned photographs, as she calls them, is the lack of material mementos in the home of her parents, who emigrated to Argentina after surviving Auschwitz. Mosaic artist and restorer Magdalena Kratsik-Storkanova, I hope I got that right, worked with glass shards found in the forests and ruins of former Sudeten villages to reflect on the fragile legacy of Czech-German coexistence. Franziska Windolf's great-grandparents were indeed expelled from Sudetenland to Germany at the end of World War II, which has inspired the artist to work with today's refugee and migrant communities and create living monuments or memory persons. Migration and exile are also the concerns of Nela Milic, a Serbian artist based in London. Her wrapped objects speak to the ways in which we carry our memories with us. Grace Schwitt, there, German-born and also based in London, explores the effects of historical trauma on our bodies and is currently researching puppeteering as a form of resistance in the Czech context. Michalina Musielak takes us to Tanzania, where she recovers memories of a forgotten episode in Tanzanian and East German history. Rossel Messiger traces the memories of rare earth elements around the world, while Michal Kindernay engages with the memories of loss in the former mining areas of Central Europe. From this brief description of the exhibition, you can hopefully get a sense of the complex histories and memories the artists are engaged with, and through diverse media such as video, sound, photography, installation, and painting, are exploring the agency of the image in relation to those complex contexts. Thus, please go and visit the exhibition after the panel discussion and allow yourselves to be emotionally and intellectually touched and challenged by the encounter with the material presence of the images. And now, it is my very great pleasure to hand over to Nikita Kadan, whose work is part of the Voices of Memory exhibition. In the last few years, Nikita has become one of the most internationally recognized Ukrainian artists. So we're very moved by the fact that you managed to get here. As you know, it's not easy to get out of Ukraine under martial law right now. Nikita will be part of the Artists' Roundtable on Thursday, 3:30 at the Kunsthalle. So now we've only got a short time, but Nikita, please say a few words, and I hope you will all give him a very special welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Astrid. Thank you all. Actually, I'm artist based in Kiev, which gives some additional context to my work now. Because, like, everybody knows that Ukraine is in a war now, but people used to think that many people, in the West used to think that war started in 2022. Actually, for us in Ukraine, this period is called full-scale war. But in fact, the war started with the annexation of Crimea in spring 2014, with the start of war in Donbass, with the hands of Russian proxy, and actually with a direct military support by Russian Federation, which officially totally denied it. And I remember this period after 2014 when plenty of highly recognized European intellectuals, they just repeated this patterns of Putin's propaganda about civil war in Ukraine and all the issues about the sharing the guilt between perpetrator and the victim. And in 2022 something changed. And many of these people whose voices are still very loud, they somehow forgot what they said during these 80 years. And I look how the discourse changed, how easily it changed, and how easily people who actually claim to have this intellectual responsibility for the collective memory, how easily they erase their own previous words. And it's how nice and good and progressive we all try to look at each moment, avoiding any contradictions which connect us with our own recent past. And it's really understandable for me, as a person who was born in early 80s, who went to school during last years of USSR, and witnessed all this transformation with the child's eyes. When 1 year, your beloved and highly respected teacher says, we all are so proud to be Soviet citizens, and next year, after summer holidays, he says, now we are so proud to be real Ukrainian patriots who suffered under Soviet totalitarianism. And it works so easily, always. And during these war years, again, I mean, since 2014, I tried to work as this little funny Cassandra, just telling people that probably there will be a big war in Europe, and that maybe we live our last nice and comfortable years, and better to prepare yourself for different scenarios, because we went through this experience even few months before the start of full-scale war. Absolute majority of people couldn't really imagine what will happen, and before the start of actual war, almost nobody expected. And really, I was, while being an artist with some international exhibitions, being invited to some panel discussions, etc. For me, it was something normal to have all these critical art discourse, critical culture in all these strong and progressive institutions, supported by governments and so on. Now it looks like some weird sort of luxury. And it seems that situation when culture and arts are actually a tool of political propaganda, of nation states and empires at war, the situation is much more like regular for the humankind. And if, like for us, this idea of universalist criticality is something really, really important, at least be ready to struggle for it under conditions which will be tough for us, disturbed people. Be prepared. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd love to talk more about this, but we'll do that on Thursday. I have now the task to call Filip Rambosek, who is chairing the panel discussion. Is that right?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It's not easy to speak after what has been said right now by Astrid Schmetterling and especially Nikita Kadan. But thank you very much for your words. We will now continue with the panel discussion. So let me also welcome you here in Campus Jebrnská, one of my favorite places in Prague, I have to say, as a Prague local citizen. So welcome to Campus Jebrnská, welcome to Prague, and welcome, most importantly, to the discussion in which we will talk about Czech-German memory culture and beyond. The word beyond is important here because we have also two guests from outside of the Czech and German context. So this is going to be a very international, colorful, interesting discussion with various perspectives on the topic. It has been actually already mentioned, so I will keep it short. I will now ask all the panelists to take their seats, please, and then I will introduce them. So please, if you can take a seat. It was already mentioned that this event is organized by the EVZ Foundation, in English, Foundation Remembrance, Responsibility and Future, together with the Memory Studies Association, and also in collaboration with the Czech-German Fund for the Future. The discussion is also part of the EVZ Conversations series, and of course also of the Memory Studies Association Annual Conference that is starting just today. So welcome everyone. It's incredible how many of you joined us. My name is Filip Rambosek. My name already also have been mentioned. I would just like to clarify one thing, because some of you might know me also in connection with one particular institution, that is the German Embassy Prague, where I work in the Science Affairs Department. But at this conference, I do not represent this institution. I speak only for myself. The topic, Czech-German memory culture and beyond. We are discussing this topic in a super anniversary year, 80 years from the end of World War II and the National Socialist injustice. Throughout the time in the 60s and later on, and especially after the democratic revolutions in Central Eastern Europe, the rejection of Nazism, Holocaust, and any kind of racial intolerance has become one of the foundations in terms of values of the European integration project. Integration project has also become sort of common ground upon which many democracies around the world has been built. However, today we are in a new situation in a way. Many of the values, many of these shared cultures of remembrance have been challenged recently. The world is full of conflicts. We are facing many crises. It's also in the title of the whole conference. So this is the right time probably to raise some of the questions once again and maybe redefine the role of remembrance and the importance of remembrance in today's world. And the starting point of our discussion will be the Czech-German example that some of us are quite familiar with, at least two of the guests here also on the panel. And I would like to ask at this point, also you, our audience, who of you would say familiar with the Czech-German history or Czech-German dialogue, or who is maybe even part of this dialogue? Could you indicate by raising your hand who is sort of in the discussion. Thanks a lot. And who is completely outside of this context from some completely different region or area and knowing just a bit. That's also perfect. So it seems it's almost like 50-50, just like on stage. So I think this is going to be a very interesting discussion. And for me, as someone from Prague and who is to an extent also part of these Czech-German debates, it's very refreshing to have a panel that is such an international one. So thank you very much for accepting the invitation. Thanks to all the organizers and partners of this event. I'm really glad to be here and to be moderating this event. Please welcome here Andrea Despot, who is sitting next to me. She is a director of the EVZ Foundation, historian by education, and she is an expert in the history of Central Eastern Europe and focuses especially on civic education and culture of remembrance. Then I will skip for now Mirta. I will come back to you later, and I will continue by introducing Tomáš Jelínek, who is the director of the Czech-German Fund for the Future. He is also historian by education. And maybe at this point we could also mention that both of these institutions, EVZ and Czech-German Fund for the Future, were also actively involved in the process of financial compensation of the victims of the Nazi regime. And both of these institutions are part of the history of reconciliation in a way. And until this day, they are the very important actors and players in the field of remembrance in the Czech-German context and also beyond. Mirta, I'm coming back to you. Sorry for skipping you for in the beginning. Mirta Kupfermink, artist, teacher, and curator. And I hope it's also fine if I mention straight away, it was already mentioned as well, that you are a daughter of Holocaust survivors. Your parents were from Poland and Hungary, who luckily survived the concentration camps in Europe and after the war moved to Argentina, where Mirta was born later. And this family history also manifests itself in her artwork throughout her artistic career. So she deals with very difficult and complex topics such as identity, memory, migration, human rights, etc. You can also see that at the exhibition. And since 2015, I will mention at least this. Mirta has been the founder and artistic director of the Laboratory of Art and Jewish Culture in Buenos Aires. Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, Olga Bubic, writer, journalist, photographer, lecturer, and art critic from Belarus. It has already been mentioned that she lives or was forced to live outside of Belarus, namely in Germany. Since 2022, she lives in Germany, and in her writings and other projects, she explores the intersections of traumatic past, memory, and landscapes. You can also see her work represented at the exhibition upstairs. Well, so I think this is going to be a great discussion. I'm very much looking forward to that. The only problem that we might have is with time and timing, because we have 4 excellent speakers here, but only some 60 minutes for the discussion. But we will try to do our best so that there is also some space for you at the end to ask your questions and share your comments with us. The structure of the debate will be quite simple. In the beginning, I would like to talk a bit more about the Czech-German reconciliation process. And in the second part of the discussion, we will sort of broaden the horizon and speak about more general topics also with examples from other regions. So let's go straight to the topic. 80 years from the end of World War II and the National Socialist injustice. I would like to hear first from Andrea Despot and Tomáš Jelínek how, where, or are the discussions and commemorations and acts of remembrance and the general mood maybe in the society in Germany and in the Czech Republic. Could you share with us how is the situation, and if you observe maybe some shifts also in the debate in the last 5, 10, 15 years.
I will try. Thank you for this very, very broad question. I will just shed light on very, very few things. Well, obviously, everyone knows we are 80 years after the end of World War II. And one might expect that we have come forward in huge steps. Well, I have my doubts that it's an entirely success story only. Although for the Czech-German relations, we do have to say that we have come a long way, and it has been a story that is both encouraging and at the same time there is room and space for more and more engagement, more dealing with the common history. What do I mean by that? It took both countries, but I'll speak for Germany now, it took a long, long time. It took decades for the German society in Germany in general to come to terms, or to at least attempt to come to terms with Nazi history and with the crimes and the persecution and the war of extermination Germany has been conducting in Europe in general and here on these grounds in particular. So it's been taking a while, and we can speak about this if it's of interest. It needed many prerequisites and preconditions to be more or less pushed. It was not a voluntary exercise, mind you, most of the time by most of the people. So it needed international pressure, it needed negotiation, it needed timing, it needed a political climate to begin coming to terms with history. Now, that having said, you asked about shifts as well. As EVZ Foundation, we are conducting a study, an empirical study for several years now, and we've come out with a memo study, that's what it's called, where we look into what is being remembered, what is being pushed away, what is suppressed memory, what is known about these chapters in history. And I would say the most striking, or maybe two most striking findings are ambivalent when you look at them. One, first time we are at a tipping point. The majority of the respondents said, enough. Let's draw a line and let's finish about talking about history, Schlussstrich. And let's draw a line under that chapter of German history. A majority said that. It's for the first time. And I think that's both alarming and it, of course, piques our ambition as a foundation to become much more active. And a second, a little bit more optimistic, especially among young respondents, there is a huge interest in history, which is good news. There are gaps in knowledge, but there is a huge interest in history. And there is a huge potential that we want to tap into of young people that want to engage themselves, that want to become involved in initiatives and projects. So I'll leave it maybe at these two findings for the moment.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So it was, I would say, the typical German Jein, right? It's good. There are some signs of progress, but it's not so simple. And there are maybe some findings that are a bit troubling or worrying. We can hopefully discuss that further later. I would now like to pass the word to Tomáš Jelínek to share his sort of assessment or evaluation of the discussions in the Czech Republic. To what extent is it similar or different to what we have just heard about Germany?
Thank you. Actually, I'm absolutely agree what Andrea said. I would say Czech and Germans are 80 years after the Second World War. I would say basically in a state of a strong memory consens, but it's not the state. It's not the state of nirvana. There is a lot of to do. We will discuss it later, and I think it's important also to know that the way to this state was very difficult, and I would shortly explain why, because I saw the half of the audience is not familiar with this issue. So it's important to know that actually until 1989, the way of commemoration was blocked. Czechoslovakia was and West Germany, these both states were in Cold War, in hostile geopolitical blocks, and the memory was actually instrumentalized by communist propaganda on the one hand, and I would say by some kind of realpolitik on the other hand. And the Czechoslovak victims of Nazism didn't get any compensation from Germany. But you know it, and I think we will see it also in the exhibition. The Second World War brought not only suffering to the Czech, Jewish, and Roma people, but the consequences of the World War brought also suffering for the more than 3 million so-called Sudeten German who had lived for centuries on the Czech territory and who were expelled from Czechoslovakia, and the commemoration of the crimes committed by the Czechs against the Sudeten German, actually this issue was absolutely taboo under the communist rule, and it was a topic only for a small group of dissidents like Václav Havel. And I would say to a certain extent, these long shadows of this taboo can be observed to this day, and we will discuss it probably also later. So the basic building block for today's memorial consensus was the so-called Czech-German Declaration, and it was an agreement which said Germany will compensate Czech Nazi victims, and the Czech Republic acknowledged also the suffering of Sudeten German, and both countries agreed not to burden the relationship with question from history. And I think that's the reason why we can today observe a vibrant civil society dealing with culture of memory. And I would say that this is fortunately also concerning the political scene, but it must be said that there are still some concerns related to the issue. So it was just a briefly picture of this development, and now we can now it's very important to discuss what can we do now more. And I would say the best idea you can get also during our special session on Wednesday. We will present 11 best practices civil societies or NGOs dealing with this topic, but on some general level we will discuss it also now.
Thank you for this overview of the process of reconciliation between Czechia and Germany, a process that has been very difficult and long, and you also mentioned that things need time, that it just doesn't come at once, but it is always a process. But to a large extent, it was can be considered a successful process between Czechia and Germany. We can also come back to that later, but let's expand the horizon now a bit and ask our colleagues from Argentina and Belarus what is the situation like in their respective countries. I would start with Olga Bubic, if you could share with us, because I guess the World War II is also commemorated for sure in Belarus, but probably in a very different way because of the authoritarian regime in Belarus. So how is the commemoration, or is it possible at all to have some kind of pluralistic discussion in Belarus? In what circles, or does these kind of debates happen rather outside of Belarus in exile, or maybe in some underground groups? How can we imagine that?
Thank you. Could we have the first image, please? Maybe that's already the answer to the question. So, like Google Street View, like this special machine that's collecting images from all around the world, Belarus was one of those countries where it was not allowed to enter for obvious reasons. And when you go to Google Street View and try to see what is happening in Belarus, you can only see the images that were downloaded by people who were taking these images for obvious reasons, as tourists, as researchers, and so on. So this historical official narrative highlights Belarus as a direct continuation of Belarusian Soviet Socialist Republic, aligning with Soviet legacy associated with order, stability, but also obedience and the absence of questioning or not stimulating reflections on the country's past. His history countdown somehow starts with the victory in the Second World War, which in post-Soviet republics was not even called Second World War. It was called Великая Отечественная война, which means Great Patriotic War, that also somehow speaks for itself. And in Minsk, which is the capital of the Republic of Belarus, more than 50% of toponymics have Soviet references. They are connected with different political leaders, writers, Soviet generals or military representatives. And this is the guy whom you recognize. So, like, this is Lenin and the House of Parliament or something, like the main building, political one in the city center. And I think it will not also be a surprise for those countries that had this communist past history, that Sovietskaya or the Soviet street used to be found in many communist countries. In Belarus, we still have more than 1,000 streets that are called Sovietskaya streets in different villages, towns, and cities. The next slide, please. And that is why speaking about revisioning history or like reflecting on history, in Belarus, this at the level of official interpretation did not happen. It doesn't mean that we never had counter-memory art and research activism. Of course, it was happening, and it is still happening very often by people who had to leave the country after the protests of 2020. And like one more example that I wanted to share with you, this is the statue to Mikhail Kalinin, that is still, again, like in the center, in one of the central squares of Minsk. He used to take the position of the chairman of all Russian Central Executive Committee, and his signature could be found on the documents like labeling ordinary people as people's enemies. And one of those people who were on such lists was actually my great-grandfather, Ivan Francevich Kozil, who disappeared in 1937, just like more than a million of other Belarusians. And I learned about his traces only a few years ago, because in the family, as it is also often happens, like these people were just kidnapped, like desaparecidos, and then like nobody knew what happened to them, and it was impossible to find those traces. So like I found out that he was actually taken to prison and was executed. He was shot, and the article according to which he was sent to jail was propaganda or agitation containing a call for overthrow. So one of the possible reasons why this happened, because he was Pole, and another reason could be connected with the fact that he traveled to America a few years before that. His name was on the list of Aquitania liner. So these are the things that are heavily present in our memory situation, like official discourse, let me repeat it. At the same time, as you can imagine, there are also things that are silenced. And there are people who are, as I call them, like memory keepers, who are put in jail if they try to raise these issues through their art, through their journalistic practice. In Belarus, these silent things are everything that is connected with Soviet repressions. And as I have already mentioned, like Belarus being back in those years a part of the USSR, so lost more than 1 million, actually 1.6 people who were killed in the period of the Great Purge, it's called, like the period of repressions of the late 30s, early 40s. So briefly, this is what is happening in Belarus. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Even though it's not easy at all to be listening to these kind of things, how difficult the situation is for those who want to keep the memory of the Soviet terror also, or other topics that are not so pleasant for the regime. Mirta, I would like to ask you, you've mentioned your family history, so you have sort of family roots in Europe in a way, but you were born in Argentina, so a very sort of specific situation. But as far as I know, Argentina was not so much involved in this in World War II, and so far we have been talking a lot about World War II and National Socialist injustice, etc. For you, these are the topics because it affected your family directly. But in Argentina as a whole, this is maybe not so important, I guess. There have also been other historical periods, such as the military dictatorship at the end of 70s and in the beginning of 80s, which might be, the sort of most important and dark time period to which, people come back again and investigate, etc. So maybe if you could briefly speak about Argentina and if there is any remembrance of the World War II, or how is the situation?
Thank you. It's on, yes. Thank you for your question. Okay. You asked me before the first presentation if you can mention that I am daughter of Auschwitz survivors. And I must say, I usually say that one of the most important things in my life happened before I was born. The history of my parents marked my life. My sisters is here and our offspring also. Argentina traditionally is a country with open doors for immigrations. Buenos Aires is shaped by many immigrations, perhaps Italian, Spanish, but I will focus in this Jewish immigration after the Second World War and Nazi immigration. During the Franco regime, while Perón was government, many Nazis found their home, and many of them entered with their name and lived with their name. Perhaps you heard about the story, he lived with another name, Adolf Eichmann, that was caught in Argentina, Pripke in the south. many places were established settlements in the north of Argentina, in Córdoba, Villa General Belgrano, in the south, Bariloche, many, and also Joseph Mengele, that he lived with his real name between Paraguay, Brazil, and Argentina, finally dying in Brazil with his name. So we have, how can you see it, sweet, sour immigration there, because my parents, with mainly the Jewish refugees from that were survived Auschwitz and the other camps, came in clandestinity. They were not able to come to enter Argentina legally, but they found and they could make a life. I must mention that besides this, everything happened, Argentina was and it is still now a good country to live in. People are mostly friendly and open to immigrants. And the dictatorship was a black period, terrible, horrible, worse for Jews. We also had 2 bomb attacks. These were not the Nazis, but very recently Jewish institutions, terrorist attacks. So it's not a peaceful territory. We have everything, but we also had life. I will ask you, please, the image. So I will continue with the images. Meanwhile, I am a multidisciplinary artist. I work with many disciplines, but the focus, the themes, although in different shapes, are always the same. So this image is an etching, printmaking, metal etching, that it turned to be like an icon in my work. Many people relate this image with my ancestors, but I must say that no, I did it in 2001, one more of our crises, and where many young people, grandchildren of immigrants, returned to Europe. So I felt that this was terrible because their ancestors came to leave roots in Argentina. I must say that my parents had made a good immigration. They made a big effort to be Argentinians. They spoke to my sister and me. I always say that I learned many maternal tongues, all of them very bad. Spanish, they spoke with a very, very strong accent, Hungarian and Polish, but to us in Spanish. When I went to school, it was another Spanish. German, it was also not their language. They spoke for us not to understand, and they didn't speak well, and they didn't like to speak German. So not Hungarian, well, this was, and this also appears a lot in my works. The next, please. So with this image of these immigrants that come, look, there is Prague, but this was not prepared for this, sorry. This was because it was part of an scenography about the golem for a theater in Buenos Aires. Prague and Buenos Aires port, and these immigrants and these crashes is what I mean that perhaps you know the kintsugi technique in Japan, that although we want to put beautiful things and to make art and to make nice things, the crashes somehow remained, and it's good. that we are remembering these crashes. So thank you to all. Please, the next one. Describing the works, you will understand very well all what I could share, all the same. This is the title of this series. These are all series, big series, embroidered on the skin of memory. So I always say with the same tool, I receive two very different transmissions with a needle. On one hand, my parents, I was embraced by numbered arms. So I remember I asked my mother, why do you have that? And she answered, not to forget. But with the needle also, I received the transmission of beautiful Hungarian embroideries. Our parental, I don't know how to say in English, house, was full of these embroideries, and it was a very European house. So with the same tool, two very different transmissions. The next, please. Well, here is my mother. This is another project, a big video installation performance, The Skin of Memory. My mother, you can see her tattoo, and he's a musician, Gabriel Lapola. What I made with this, what I wanted to make is a comparison with ornamental contemporary tattoos that give a very special identity that you choose to what meant to be tattooed, taking out your identity. And nobody asked if you wanted to have a number on your arm. So this was a big project. The next one, please. Well, this is a box. It's an artist book. What I included this image just to speak a little bit about how the past comes to the present all the time, that the past not so easily ends. Is what you explain above the line to say this is finished. I will tell it very shortly. You come to Argentina, Buenos Aires, next conference, you can hear more. But we were raised, my sister and me, with the story that my grandparents from my mother's side committed suicide when they couldn't take their children out. They were imprisoned before Eichmann made the big deportation. They were, from the first day the Germans entered in Budapest, they were in a prison, in a Hungarian prison. So the story, during many, many years, the transmission was different. Sorry, I will go from individual history, but this will drive us to collective memory. Survivors were not the same. Not everybody spoke. In my home, my parents spoke a lot, but I received different transmission. My father, who died young, he didn't speak very profoundly about his sufferings and losses, not so much. My mother, I think that every day, she lived many years, 100 years. I think that every day she named her parents, longing for them. But in year 2013, a new history appears from Switzerland. A young journalist, Sasha Batiani, appeared with the non-official story that he discovered, because I will tell shortly, he is the grandson of Marita Sterhazy, who was a kind of friend of my mother, and that Marita saw when her father asked a German soldier to kill them. So my mother never knew exactly everything. Next chapter in the next conference. But this is what I wanted to represent here, because this box, this is an artist book that is now in the library in Toronto. They have it in the university. It has a hidden drawer. So this story was hidden during 70 years until someone, as you researchers, discovered. Please, the next one. Well, first I will speak very shortly about these photographs. In our home, we didn't have photographs. My parents came with nothing, of course. So, since I was very, very little, I always was very attracted to photographs. If I saw something in the street, I collected. Always I collected. Sometimes I imagined names. This was this aunt. This was, because it was always story without materiality. I think perhaps that's why I'm an artist that need material. And afterwards, I began asking people, because realizing that paper photographs will end, most of them, in the garbage or in the flea market, if they are beautiful. I tried to collect. So, based in two photos, real photos, this photo is the my father's family in Łódź, in Poland. I represented myself in the school holding this tree with all my ancestors, because I felt always that I am walking with all my ancestors everywhere. I felt that I was different. So if you can put the video now. Thank you. So this was my feeling also, and the exhibition that is that we have here has to do with all. I don't know if I answered.
Yes, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for sharing your also family story and your art that we can also see upstairs at the exhibition. I think it helps to understand your situation in Argentina with your roots being in Europe. You also mentioned one important thing, that past always comes back, that you just cannot somehow suppress it. And that's maybe the point where we can reconnect with the Czech-German story and with the topic of or idea of Schlussstrich, that you can draw this line and sort of forget. You can do that, but it won't work, because past will always come back, and it's a never-ending process of commemorating. You can't just avoid that. So I would like now to turn to Andrea Despot and Tomáš Jelínek once again to think about the challenges of your work in your institution. Because you have some role in the society, also in Germany, try to be active in the debates, active in civic education, etc. Yet you have also mentioned some data, and it's not always a progress. There can be some ups and downs. So how do you try to deal with that, and what kind of programs do you offer, or what is your strategy to be effective in the debate?
Well, thank you, but before I answer, I promise I will, let me compliment the artists on their work, because I really believe that it is the finest examples and the finest manifestations of what we attempt to do as organizations. Be it what you mentioned, the attribution to either artifacts or personal memories, be it, as Olga mentioned, the different layers of history. In the Belarusian case, we have the Nazi the Nazi experience, we have the communist dictatorship, we have the current suppressive and authoritarian crackdowns. So we have multiple layers of remembrance, and then one begins to understand if one layer is not dealt with, it becomes more and more complicated, of course. And as you rightly said, you can't escape the past. So having said that, I think it's important to do what the two of you have already done, which is find approaches, find ways of dealing with, be it personal, family, or collective memory, be it artistic, creative, or another method. So we at the EVZ Foundation, we encourage not only young people, but in general, organizations and projects we work with to open up, so to speak, and to initiate and activate curiosity, creativity, examination of one's own families, because it's nice, of course, if people go to archives and study history, but their families are archives of some sort. So we would encourage that. I think that's of course, a challenge. Another challenge, of course, is knowledge. And I think Olga mentioned it. History can be a weapon. History is used and misused by some. And so what is one ingredient for us to be more resilient and to be more immune to distortion, neglect, and propaganda is knowledge. So this is what we try to do. This is what our studies have also shown, that there are huge gaps in knowledge. Also, when it comes to the Czech-German, German-Czech relations, if you ask, in our studies we did, what are the countries that you associate most, for instance, with World War II? If I'm not mistaken, it's only 5% that even mention the Czech Republic, the Czechoslovakia. Most of the respondents say it's France and Great Britain, German respondents. So again, a third challenge then would be for us as a German foundation, having been founded in the year 2000. So here again, quite late, decades after 1945. So it's bring not only knowledge, but bring conscience, historical conscience to the German population and close the knowledge gaps. And then one last thing, which is probably the most difficult, knowledge alone doesn't or is not enough for taking position or having the right attitude to democracy, human rights, diversity. So knowledge is not an automatic kind of immunization program. So we need to go one step further. And this is what we try to do with our work in the foundation, is to activate young people, well, anyone, but young people, to initiate social entrepreneurship, to make citoyens, responsible civic or citizens that will take responsibility in their hands. So I make a full stop here because that's already worth a lifetime.
Yeah, thank you very much for outlining some of the strategies that you follow. It's very interesting, increasing the knowledge or closing the knowledge gap. As you put it, building up the historical consciousness and encouraging people, activate people to be active on their own, and maybe use also the family histories to learn from. So one of these were some of the topics, some of the strategies that the EVZ or FOZ, as we know it, pursues. How does it sound to Tomáš Jelínek? Is it very familiar? Is it very similar to what the Czech-German Fund for the Future does? Or are there some other challenges? Because you have mentioned, for instance, something that might be specific for Czech Republic is the legacy of the communist dictatorship. Let's say we've also mentioned briefly the expulsion of the German population after the Second World War. So there might be some differences. How does the Czech-German Fund for the Future?
I would say the biggest challenges are really similar. Andrea didn't mention also the challenge in kind of that survivors and eyewitnesses are passing away. It's also very important, or it was much more easier to communicate with also young people having the support of survivors, and I can also see, or we can observe also in our praxis the results of the memo study. For example, this kind of fatigue of memorization and the danger of ritualization of the memory, and I think it's really important that we try to get to the people so much space for their own ideas, also to the young people, and not to try to come with some finished solutions. And we have good experience in our foundation in this year. Our topic of the year, our motto was the slogan how to say never again today. So it's not important only to say to it was for us important to inspire to reflect what does it mean today, not only to say it's important that we that it will never come again. And also our competition for pupils from the secondary schools was very successful. They sent to us many video and entire video entries, 1 to 2 minute video entries, and it was really great to see how the huge imagination and creativity, and as we said, it was very important for them that they could search, they could look for some overlaps from history to today, because as Andrea said, the interest is very strong, the interest to history and the questions, what can we learn from history in the context of today's crisis and wars. And for me, it was, for example, very interesting to see that one of the best videos depicted Donald Trump, the Ukraine, and the slogan "Make the Munich Agreement Great Again." So you know Munich Agreement. It was a symbol of the appeasement politics of the 30s, and I think these are very good examples how that the young people need to have a space for their own answers, and then I think this interest will lead to this reflection.
Thank you very much for sharing some specific projects of the Czech-German Fund for the Future. I think it's clear from what you are saying that it's a never-ending process, and that what we can hope for is that these institutions like that continue to do their work and have an impact, hopefully. Mirta already showed us something from her work, but let's give also Olga the chance to speak a bit and introduce us to her artistic work a bit before we come to the sort of closing brainstorming.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to refer to a few things and reflections that have been articulated here, because they also resonate with my practice both as an essayist, writer, and as a visual artist. So actually, one of the things that I was writing and researching, but also thinking about, has to do closely with the statement of past always comes back and other similar theses. I call them loops of time, and of course it would be appropriate to remember here Karl Marx, who wrote in 1852, "History repeats itself, first as a tragedy and the second as a farce." Another thing that I also wanted to mention, and this is something that I actually can see in a positive way developing in this continent, but also in kind of like Berlin community that I'm building myself, giving little lectures and gatherings at our apartment in Berlin, is that nowadays we shouldn't approach, and it's beautiful when we are not approaching, actually looking at this conference, memory studies as something that is only connected with a particular country or a particular region. We really need to zoom out and to see how much we have in common, because if we talk about repressions, if we talk about dictatorship and so on, there is so much that we do have in common. When I was in Hong Kong giving a lecture 2 years ago and also talking about my projects related to memory, I was very careful not to make clear comparisons, but there were people in the audience who were saying, "Oh, but this is exactly what is happening right now in Hong Kong. It's the curse of being small country, open, speaking different languages," because in Belarus back in the 20s there were 4 official languages, including Yiddish. Like how it is important to see these connections. And sometimes you don't really need to explain a lot, because people from Iran, people from Argentina, they understand without really like deep explanation. And you can really get connected and to see how much you can also learn from each other and to feel this solidarity. And the last thing that I wanted to say is it is connected with my first project that I was doing related to memory. It's called The Art of Not Forgetting, and not is in brackets here. When I was collecting stories or memories of 2 types of from Belarusians back in winter 2021, and I was asking them to think about or to recall 2 memories. One that they consider to be most resourceful for this period of their life, and the other one that is most traumatic. In no way this project was connected with politics, because, like politicians come and go and memories remain. So it was very like open question. And then I was collecting in the book these stories of these memories and photographing also people in the moment when they were traveling back to their memories, because I was doing this through Zooms, through the computer, and they could be really free in front of their cameras because my sound was off, the image was off, they're just sitting in front of their laptops and having this mental journey, and you could see how your face changes actually when you're thinking about something positive and resourceful and something that is traumatic. And there are many conclusions actually that I took from analyzing also the texts the memories that I connected. And one of them was that when you talk to these people a year later, some of them say, "I do remember in detail my traumatic memory, but I don't remember what my resourceful memory was." And for me, this is also a nice thing to reflect, because very often when we talk about memories, we focus on trauma, of course, on victims and on like terrible things that were happening. But in every terrible situation, there is also manifestation of something good, of solidarity, of sharing, of inventing of strategy of how to help each other under repressions in the situation of prison or concentration camp. And my thing is that it's so easy for us to forget good things, and we're very much also because of our brain focusing on fear and danger and so on. So one of the things would be to remember good things and to share on these stories of solidarities to future generations.
Thank you very much for these important remarks and also excellent questions regarding the transnational functioning of memory, or maybe comparing things that you would not sort of at first sight think that are comparable, finding some similarities, looking at processes that happen in different parts of the world, but maybe have some similarities. This is also one of the tasks of the conference, and I think that this was an excellent also opening and invitation to the exhibition, because when I think of the title again, Voices of Memory, this panel was also about 4 voices, different approaches. My idea as a moderator in the beginning, to be honest, was that I will be able to connect it a bit more and make a bit more coherent story. But at the end, I have to say it's not necessary. Because these were just 4 very interesting contributions and different perspectives on the topic, and all of you in the audience, I'm sure about that, can create your own coherent or not coherent story out of that. You can do whatever you want with that. But I think there were so many interesting contributions from you that we all certainly took something from the discussion. So thank you very much for that, and please last round of applause for our panelists. Andrea Despot, Tomáš Jelínek, Mirta Kupfermink and Olga Bubic.